What my grandma left behind when she died last month broke the family. My grandma passed away last month. She was 83, and honestly, the strongest woman I've ever known. She raised my dad and his two sisters, practically by herself after my grandpa left. When my dad was a teenager, she was tough, stubborn, and sometimes judgmental. But she had this old school sense of fairness that you couldn't argue with. For context, my family is complicated. My dad, 52, is the oldest sibling. Then there's Aunt Linda, 50, and Aunt Cheryl, 48. I'm 23, my dad's only child. Growing up, I was very close to my grandma, closer than anyone else in the family. My parents divorced when I was little, and my mom wasn't around much. So I spent a lot of weekends at grandma's house. She cooked for me, taught me how to sew, helped me with homework, and honestly, she was more of a mother figure than my actual mom. Here's the thing. My aunts were never that close to her. They came around for holidays, but it always felt performative. They wanted to be in her good graces when money was involved. When she downsized 10 years ago and sold her old house, both aunts fought tooth and nail over who deserved some of the antiques she didn't want to keep. My dad mostly stayed out of it. But my aunts never forgot that grandma gave me her wedding china set for when you're older. That's when the first cracks started to show. Fast forward to last month, grandma's health took a turn. She had a stroke and was gone within 2 days. It was awful, but peaceful in a way. She went in her sleep the second night in hospice. I was there holding her hand when it happened. None of my aunts were there. My dad came a few hours later, but Linda and Cheryl said they were too overwhelmed to come. We had the funeral, which was tense but civil. My aunts were already whispering about the will, though like before we'd even buried her. They kept dropping hints like, well, we'll need to make sure everything is divided fairly. And I hope Mom didn't let anyone influence her decisions. I didn't say much, but I did know something they didn't. About 6 months ago, Grandma had asked me to drive her to her lawyer's office. She didn't tell me exactly what it was about, but she said, I've made up my mind about certain things. People might not understand, but one day you will. I didn't pry. Well, today was the will reading. It was at Grandma's lawyer's office. This older guy named Mr. Saunders who's been handling her stuff for decades. I'd been low-key dreading it, because I knew the vultures, aka my aunts, were already circling. It was me, my dad, Aunt Linda, Aunt Cheryl, and Mr. Saunders in this stuffy conference room with a giant oak table. Everyone was tense. My aunts came in together whispering, clutching Starbucks cups like they were preparing for battle. My dad sat kind of quietly, arms crossed, clearly just wanting it to be over. I sat next to him, trying not to shake. Mr. Saunders read the standard legal stuff first. Being of sound mind, blah blah. Then he started dividing things. At first it was normal. She left her jewelry box to Cheryl, a set of teacups to Linda, and a few little heirlooms to each of them. My aunts exchanged smug little glances like, see, we're getting ours. Then Mr. Saunders cleared his throat. As for the remainder of my estate, including all property, financial accounts, and assets, I leave it entirely to my granddaughter, OP. The room went silent. Like pin drop silent, I thought I misheard him. Linda literally said, what? Like she was about to laugh, but then she realized he wasn't joking. Cheryl gasped and went red in the face immediately. My dad looked at me with wide eyes, then back at the lawyer, like he couldn't believe it either. Mr. Saunders kept reading. Grandma had left a letter attached to the will, basically explaining her decision. It said, I love all my children, but I cannot reward selfishness. She has been there for me when no one else was. She has shown me kindness, patience, and love, and she deserves to be taken care of. This is my wish, and it is final. I swear Linda almost fell out of her chair. Cheryl started crying and yelling at the same time. This isn't fair. She was manipulated. There's no way she did this in her right mind. Linda jumped on that train immediately, saying, she had a stroke. Her brain wasn't working right for months before that. This isn't valid. My dad, to his credit, didn't explode. He just said, you both know Mom was stubborn as hell. If she wrote this, it's because she meant it. That set Cheryl off more. Oh, of course you'd defend this. Maybe you were in on it too. Did you convince her to give it all to your daughter? I tried to speak up like, I didn't even know, but Linda cut me off and basically hissed, you don't deserve any of this. You're a child. You didn't work for it. We did. We're her children, not you. Mr. Saunders tried to calm them down and explained that Grandma had updated her will multiple times, most recently last summer. He said she was fully competent. They had medical documentation, and there was no sign of coercion. It was legally airtight. Didn't matter. My aunt stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard a picture frame rattled off the wall. After they left, Mr. Saunders gave me another envelope from Grandma. Inside was a handwritten letter, just for me. It said, don't let them tear you apart over this. This isn't about money, it's about values. You are the only one I trust to carry my memory. Stand tall. I burst into tears right there in front of everyone. My dad put his arm around me and told me we'd figure it out. But I'm terrified. Because I know my aunts aren't just going to let this go. And I was right. Within 2 hours of leaving the office, both of them were blowing up my phone with threats, insults, and promises to fight this until the end. This is only the beginning. I knew the second I walked out of that lawyer's office that my life was about to change forever. But I didn't expect it to get this ugly this fast. By the time I got home that evening, I had 47 missed calls and texts, mostly from Linda and Cheryl. The texts ranged from angry to downright hateful. Stuff like, you conniving little B-word, you'll regret this. We're not letting you steal what's ours. Enjoy it while you can, the lawyers will eat you alive. I didn't even reply. My dad told me to block them, but part of me wanted to know how bad this was going to get. Spoiler very. 2 days later, Cheryl showed up at my apartment. She didn't knock. She banged on the door until my downstairs neighbor texted me like, someone's about to break your door in. When I finally opened it, Cheryl barged past me and started pacing my living room like a rabid animal. You think this is yours? She snapped. It's not. Mom was manipulated. You're a spoiled brat who got lucky. That money is ours. I tried to stay calm. Aunt Cheryl, I didn't ask for any of this. Grandma made her choice. Wrong answer. She exploded. She accused me of poisoning Grandma against her own kids, of using her for money, even of making sure she died before she could change her will back. That last part made my blood run cold. I told her to leave or I'd call the police. She finally stormed out, but not before saying, this isn't over. Not by a long shot. That same week, I got served with paperwork. They're contesting the will. Both Linda and Cheryl hired a lawyer together and filed a petition, claiming undue influence and lack of capacity. Basically, they're saying I tricked Grandma into cutting them out. I can't even describe how it feels to read your own family's accusations, written in black and white legal documents. It's surreal. Dad immediately called Mr. Saunders, who reassured us that the will is extremely solid. Grandma updated it in front of multiple witnesses, with medical clearance. But he also warned us, just because the case is weak doesn't mean it won't be messy and expensive. Meanwhile, the family group chat is a dumpster fire. My aunts are spamming it with paragraphs about how I've betrayed the family and how Grandma would be ashamed of me. Some cousins have taken sides. A couple messaged me privately to say they think it's bullis word, and they know how much I did for Grandma. But others are siding with Linda and Cheryl, calling me greedy. I haven't slept more than a few hours a night since this started. Every time my phone buzzes, my stomach drops. Then yesterday it got worse. Linda posted a long rant on Facebook, tagging half the extended family, basically painting me as some manipulative gold digger. She wrote, "It's disgusting when selfish people take advantage of the elderly. Mom wasn't in her right mind, and now an entire family has been robbed. Blood should come before money, but some people don't understand that." I didn't respond, but people have been DMing me nonstop, either supporting me or accusing me. My social media is a war zone. And now my dad just told me they want to have a family meeting this weekend. He says it's to talk things out before the legal stuff drags on. But I already know it's going to be a firing squad. I don't know if I can handle this. The so-called family meeting was this past Saturday. And honestly, I'm still shaking from it. Dad insisted we go, even though I begged him not to. He said it's better to face them head on than let them stew, in which sounded noble, but he underestimated how vicious his sisters could be. We met at Linda's house, which already felt like enemy territory. As soon as we walked in, I knew it was a setup. Linda and Cheryl were sitting side by side on the couch, arms crossed with stacks of papers in front of them. Their lawyer wasn't there, but they clearly had prepared statements, like this was a courtroom. I sat down quietly next to Dad. Nobody offered me water, nobody even said hello. Linda started immediately. "You need to do the right thing. Grandma wasn't in her right mind. That will is a joke. If you had any decency, you'd walk away from it." I tried to explain, again, that I didn't influence Grandma. But Cheryl cut me off. "You've been plotting this for years. Spending time with her, sucking up to her, pretending to care. Don't act innocent. We all know what you were after." That stung more than I want to admit. Because yes, I was with Grandma all the time, but not for money. For love, she was my safe place. To hear them twist that into manipulation made me feel sick. Dad spoke up. "Enough. Mom made her decision. You might not like it, but you need to accept it." Linda slammed her hand on the table. "We're her children. It doesn't matter what some stupid lawyer says, this isn't fair." Then Cheryl leaned across the table and looked me dead in the eye. "If you don't give up the inheritance, we will destroy you. We will drag this through court for years. You'll be broke from legal fees before you ever see a dime." When we got to the car, I burst into tears. Dad hugged me and said, "She chose you for a reason. Don't let them bully you into giving it up." But his voice shook, and I could tell even he was scared about what comes next. Sure enough, Monday morning we got a letter from their attorney. They're officially contesting the will in court, claiming Grandma was mentally incompetent and that I exerted undue influence. Mr. Saunders, our lawyer, says the case is weak. Grandma had an evaluation just 3 weeks before she updated the will, perfectly sound mind. And she did the signing with independent witnesses, not family present. From a legal standpoint, it's strong. But he warned us this could take years, and tens of thousands in legal fees. Money that would come straight out of the estate. Which is exactly what Linda and Cheryl want. They'd rather burn it all down than see me have it. In the meantime, everything is frozen. I can't touch a cent. Not the savings, not the house, not even Grandma's car. It's all tied up until the court makes a decision. And the smear campaign hasn't stopped. Cheryl made another Facebook post yesterday basically implying I forged documents. Linda called my dad's boss to tell him he raised a thief. Thankfully, his boss knows it's nonsense. But still humiliating. One cousin unfriended me and sent me a DM calling me a snake. I've been having panic attacks at night. Sometimes I almost feel guilty, like maybe I should just walk away to keep the peace. But then I remember Grandma's letter. "Don't let them tear you apart over this. She trusted me, and I don't want to betray that. But it feels like my entire family is crumbling, and it's only getting worse. The court date hasn't even been set yet, and already it feels like I'm drowning." The first step was mediation. Basically, before the court drags things out, they force both sides to sit down with a neutral mediator and see if we can work something out. That's code for see if they can pressure me into giving up most of what Grandma left me. The mediator session was a nightmare. Linda and Cheryl showed up with their lawyer, all smug and smirking like they'd already won. Their lawyer kept hammering this narrative. Grandma wasn't mentally fit. I exploited my closeness to her. It would be better to settle now than have my reputation destroyed in court. At one point, Cheryl leaned over and whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "You're not strong enough for this. You'll crack." Our lawyer calmly laid out the facts, medical records, witnesses, everything. He basically said, "Your case has no legs." But instead of backing down, their lawyer said, "Then we'll see you in court." My clients are prepared to spend years fighting. Dad lost his temper at that point. He said, "You'd rather bankrupt Mom's estate just to spite your niece? This is disgusting." Linda shot back, "Maybe if you weren't such a failure, Mom wouldn't have felt sorry for your daughter." That cut deep. Dad went quiet, and I could see the hurt on his face. The mediator eventually ended the session, saying there was no compromise in sight. Translation, buckle up, this is going to court. The ripple effects are insane. Extended family has started taking sides. Some cousins messaged me privately to say they're proud of me for standing up. But others? They're parroting Linda and Cheryl's narrative. I found out Linda has been calling relatives one by one, telling them I brainwashed Grandma. Cheryl apparently told someone at church that I isolated Grandma from her children. Now half the family won't even speak to me. The worst part? My cousin Rachel, Linda's daughter, 26, used to be like a sister to me. We grew up together. She came over last week to talk, and for a second I thought maybe she'd be reasonable. But nope. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Look, I know you think Grandma loved you, but don't you get it? This isn't fair. The money should stay with her kids. Just walk away." That's what a real family member would do. When I told her no, she snapped, "Then don't expect me to defend you when everyone turns on you." And then she left. That one broke me. I cried for hours. Our lawyer is confident but realistic. He says, "The case is very likely to be ruled in my favor, but Linda and Cheryl can drag it out with appeals. The estate pays legal fees until it's settled, meaning my inheritance is shrinking every month this drags on. In other words, even if I win, I could lose." Dad suggested I settle, give them a portion just to end it. He hates himself for saying it, but he said he can't stand watching me go through this. He thinks Grandma would have wanted peace, but I keep going back to her letter. This isn't about money, it's about values. She didn't cut them out for no reason. She wanted to make a point. If I cave now, doesn't that erase her decision? Still, I'm so tired. Last night, Cheryl crossed another line. She emailed me from a burner account pretending to be a concerned friend, saying, "Better give it up before people find out what really happened in that hospital room." I knew it was her. The wording, the tone, it's exactly how she talks. But the implication? That I did something to Grandma? It made me feel physically ill. I forwarded it to our lawyer. He said we can use it to show harassment, maybe even file a restraining order. But emotionally, I feel like I'm cracking. Every day feels like a fight for survival. And this is only the beginning. This morning was the preliminary court hearing. I didn't sleep at all last night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grandma's face and heard her letter in my head. Stand tall. The courthouse smelled like old paper and nerves. Dad and I sat on one side with Mr. Saunders. Across the aisle were Linda, Cheryl, and their lawyer. They looked smug, like this was their stage. Cheryl even wore black, like she was at a funeral, as if she was the grieving saint and I was the villain. The judge started by reviewing the petition. Linda and Cheryl claimed Grandma lacked testamentary capacity and that I exerted undue influence. Their lawyer gave an opening statement that made my skin crawl. He painted me as this manipulative granddaughter who isolated an elderly woman from her rightful heirs. He even said I inserted myself into Grandma's affairs for financial gain. I sat there shaking, trying not to cry. Then Mr. Saunders stood up. Calm, steady, he laid out everything. The medical evaluation showing Grandma was perfectly competent 3 weeks before she signed. The independent witnesses present during the signing. The fact that she'd revised her will multiple times, each time more strongly in my favor. The letter she left for me explaining her reasoning. By the time he finished, even the judge looked unimpressed with their case. But here's the thing. The judge didn't throw it out. He set a trial date, which means months of discovery, depositions, and hearings. This isn't over. When we left the courthouse, Linda cornered me in the hallway. With this cold smile, she whispered, "You might think you won today, but trials drag on. People change their minds. You'll crack." I couldn't even respond. Dad stepped between us and told her to back off. She just laughed and walked away. That night, I got another wave of texts. Rachel, my cousin who used to be like a sister, sent me one that broke me. Grandma would have wanted us united. "You're the reason we're falling apart." I stared at that message for an hour. Then I cried until I couldn't breathe. Because maybe she's right. Maybe I am the reason the family is crumbling. If I just walked away, maybe things would go back to normal. Maybe I could have my cousins back. Maybe the Facebook post would stop. Maybe Dad wouldn't look 10 years older every morning. But then I remembered things weren't normal before. Linda and Cheryl have always been greedy. Always tearing at Grandma, always fighting over scraps. This isn't new. Grandma knew that. That's why she did what she did. The trial date is set for 6 months from now. 6 months of waiting, 6 months of legal bills, 6 months of being called a thief and a manipulator by my own family. Dad keeps telling me we'll get through it. But I can see it in his eyes, he's tired. He blames himself for not protecting me from his sisters sooner. And me? I don't know who I am anymore. I don't recognize my family. I don't recognize myself. But I do know one thing. There's no going back now. Even if I win, the family I grew up with is gone. Forever. The last few weeks have been consumed by one word: depositions. If you've never been through one, It's basically where lawyers drag you into a conference room, put you under oath, and pick apart every detail of your life to see if you'll slip. It's intimidating as hell. I had mine last Thursday. Their lawyer grilled me for nearly 4 hours. Questions like, how often did you visit your grandmother? Did you ever discuss inheritance with her? Were you aware she was cutting her children out of the will? Did you provide transportation to her lawyer's office? Did you encourage her not to tell her children? It felt like a trap in every direction. I answered honestly. I visited her multiple times a week, never discussed money with her, had no idea about the specifics of her will, and yes, I drove her to her lawyer once, but only because she asked. When I explained that, the lawyer smirked like he'd caught me. So you were present at the creation of this will? I wanted to scream. Driving her doesn't equal coercion, but I could tell they're trying to spin it as if I orchestrated everything. Dad had his deposition the next day. When he got home, he looked broken. He said they tried to paint him as a failed son, a loser who leaned on Grandma financially. They wanted to show motive, that he encouraged her to give everything to me because he couldn't provide for me himself. That crushed him. He's worked his butt off all my life, even when Mom left, even when money was tight. He's not perfect, but he's a good dad. To see his sisters weaponize his struggles against him, I've never seen him look so small. Here's where it gets wild. During Cheryl's deposition, something slipped. Our lawyer wasn't there, but he got the transcript afterward. Apparently, when pressed about her relationship with Grandma, Cheryl admitted they hadn't spoken for almost 6 months before she died. 6 months. She tried to spin it, saying Mom was difficult and I needed space, but the damage was done. If this goes to trial, that'll come out. How can you claim you were robbed of inheritance when you weren't even on speaking terms with the person? And Linda? Her deposition revealed she'd asked Grandma for money multiple times over the years. Loans she never repaid. Our lawyer said it paints a very clear picture of why Grandma might have excluded them. Of course, Linda and Cheryl are furious those details are on record, which means they're doubling down on the smear campaign. Since the depositions, the harassment has gotten worse. They've been sending letters to my apartment. Not legal letters, personal ones. Pages and pages of venom. Stuff like, you'll never get away with this. Enjoy being alone because no family will stand by you. We'll make sure everyone knows what you really are. I've started keeping a folder of them for evidence, but emotionally it's exhausting. Every envelope feels like a punch in the gut. Dad wants to file for a restraining order. I'm scared it'll just escalate things further. Here's the kicker. Some relatives are finally starting to see through Linda and Cheryl. My cousin Mark, from Dad's side, called me and said, honestly, this is embarrassing. They're making fools of themselves. Grandma's decision was hers. Hearing that almost made me cry, but others, not so much. Rachel, the cousin who used to be close to me, testified in her deposition that she believes Grandma wasn't all there near the end, and that I spent too much time alone with her. She might have single-handedly given them their strongest argument. I feel like I lost a sister all over again. The trial is 3 months away. 3 months of waiting, stress, and more family poison. Our lawyer says we're in a strong position, but I don't feel strong. I feel hollow. Grandma trusted me to carry her memory, but right now it feels like all I'm carrying is her family's hatred. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to hold it much longer. The morning of the preliminary hearing felt like stepping into another world. I had been in court buildings before, for jury duty once, and another time when a friend needed a character witness, but never as the unwilling centerpiece of a family implosion. The courthouse itself smelled of dust, coffee, and nerves. People shuffled in and out of rooms. Attorneys whispered with their clients. Bailiffs barked instructions. And the tension in the air buzzed like static. My parents didn't sit with me. That much was clear the second we all walked in. Mom avoided my eyes completely, pretending to be scrolling on her phone, while Dad sat stiff-backed 2 rows ahead with his lawyer. My Aunt Linda, in her stiff gray pantsuit, clutched her purse like a lifeline. My Uncle Gary leaned back in his chair with crossed arms, glaring at me as if I'd personally orchestrated Grandma's will to spite him. I sat next to Sarah, my attorney. She was calm, collected, the kind of woman who could stare down a storm and not blink. They'll throw everything at you, she whispered as the clerk called the session to order. Stay quiet, stay calm, and let me do the talking. Your grandmother's wishes are legally binding. That's the foundation here. The hearing opened with the judge reviewing the case. He was a man in his late 60s, thinning white hair, eyes sharp behind his glasses. This matter concerns the estate of Margaret Holt, he said, his voice echoing in the wood-paneled courtroom. The will leaves the bulk of her estate to her granddaughter, Emily Holt, that's me, and omits other family members, who are now contesting. The word omits landed like a gunshot. My cousins, sitting in a huddle behind Linda, muttered under their breath. Linda's lawyer, a slick man in a navy suit, stood first. He launched into an argument about how Grandma had been unduly influenced by me, how I had isolated her in her final months, how her mental state was questionable. He painted me as manipulative, conniving, practically a predator. My hands clenched under the table. I wanted to shout that I had spent years running errands for Grandma, sitting with her when no one else bothered, making her soup when she was sick, listening to her tell the same stories over and over. That wasn't manipulation. That was love. But Sarah squeezed my wrist, grounding me in silence. When it was our turn, Sarah stood. The will was signed, dated, and notarized according to law. Mrs. Holt met with her attorney privately, without my client present, to ensure her wishes were her own. The records will confirm this. Allegations of undue influence are unfounded and, frankly, insulting to Mrs. Holt's memory, the courtroom murmured. Dad's face flushed red, but he stayed stone-faced. The judge called a recess and we spilled into the hallway. That's when it happened, the confrontation I'd been dreading. Linda cornered me near the water fountain. You think you deserve this? She hissed, her face tight with fury. You think you were the only one who loved her? I swallowed hard. I never said that. Grandma made her choice. She was confused. Linda's voice cracked. People nearby turned to watch. She was sick, and you swooped in, whispering in her ear. You poisoned her against us. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. No, I whispered back. She saw who showed up. And who didn't. Her mouth opened, but no words came. For a moment, I thought I saw guilt flash across her face. Just a flicker, but then it hardened back into rage. She stormed off, muttering about how she'd never forgive me. The rest of the day dragged on with more accusations, more legal jargon, more sideways glances that cut deeper than knives. By the end, the judge didn't issue a final ruling. Instead, he scheduled a full trial date. Weeks of discovery and depositions loomed ahead. That night, I went home and sat alone in my apartment. The silence was deafening. Grandma's necklace lay on my nightstand, the last thing she'd given me before she passed. I held it in my hand and wondered if she knew what kind of war she had ignited, or if, somehow, she had known this was the only way the truth about our family would ever come out. The weeks leading up to the trial were brutal. Linda and Cheryl started a full-on social media campaign, posting vague, accusatory statements about family betrayal and greed that had distant relatives and friends commenting angrily. Even our lawyer's office warned us, ignore it. Let the court decide, don't engage. I spent hours preparing with Sarah, practicing answers to every possible question, reviewing every interaction with Grandma, every hospital visit, every drive to the lawyer's office. It felt surreal to see my life boiled down into a legal timeline. Like my entire existence could be twisted into a story of manipulation. Then there were the psychological tactics. Cheryl sent me an anonymous package, containing photos of Grandma, from her last Christmas, smiling, seemingly unaware of the tensions. Alongside them was a note, you ruined her final months. I recognized her handwriting instantly. Dad and I started sleeping in shifts. The stress was too much for either of us to manage alone. Every ring of the phone sent my heart racing. Every knock at the door made me jump. One evening, my cousin Mark, who had always been somewhat neutral, invited me to talk privately. Look, he said quietly, I know you've done nothing wrong, but there's stuff you need to know. Linda and Cheryl, they weren't honest about Grandma's finances. He handed me old bank statements showing repeated attempts by the aunts to withdraw or redirect funds, sometimes without Grandma's knowledge. I think Grandma saw all that, Mark whispered. She made her decision for a reason. I realized then that the estate was more than just money. It was Grandma's way of punishing greed and rewarding loyalty. But that didn't make facing them in court any less terrifying. The trial opened like a war. Linda and Cheryl's lawyer repeated their accusations: undue influence, manipulation, and incompetence. The courtroom was packed, neighbors, extended family, even local reporters. Sarah delivered my side with precision. She read Grandma's letter aloud in court, the same one that had comforted me for weeks. It was chilling to hear the judge quietly murmur, compelling. Still, my heart sank when Rachel took the stand for the defense. She painted me as opportunistic and selfish, claiming I had spent too much time alone with Grandma, and that I isolated her children. I felt my world collapse. My own cousin was testifying against me. The trial took a dark turn when Cheryl accidentally admitted under oath that she hadn't visited Grandma for 6 months before her death. Linda's repeated attempts to present herself as loving and attentive began to unravel. Sarah seized the moment, asking about past incidents of financial pressure and manipulative behavior by the aunts. The courtroom murmured. Cousins whispered among themselves. Their image as wronged children was crumbling before our eyes. Even Rachel's testimony started losing credibility when other witnesses confirmed Grandma's competence and clarity in her final months. The final day was electric. The courtroom was tense. Every word felt like a spark. Linda and Cheryl's lawyer gave a passionate closing statement, full of accusations and moral appeals. Sarah countered with Grandma's documented medical records, witness statements, and the heartfelt letters she left for me. At one point, Linda broke down, crying and yelling, "This isn't fair!" The judge banged his gavel. The entire room went silent. The judge entered with a somber look. We all held our breath. After reviewing all evidence and testimonies, I find that the will is valid. Margaret Holt was of sound mind at the time of signing, and there is no proof of undue influence. Therefore, the estate remains in the sole possession of Emily Holt, the named beneficiary. I felt my knees go weak. Relief washed over me, but it was bitter. I had won, yes, but at what cost? The aunts stormed out, hurling curses, while the cousins stared awkwardly. Rachel avoided my gaze entirely. Dad hugged me tightly, tears streaming down his face. Even though I legally won, the emotional battlefield was far from over. Linda and Cheryl immediately hinted at appeals. Social media rants continued. Family gatherings were now impossible. I spent weeks in a fog, processing what had happened. Grandma's decision had been validated, but her family had fractured beyond repair. Cousins took sides. Friends didn't know who to trust. I realized something essential. Grandma didn't just leave me money, she left me responsibility to uphold the values she had always cherished: honesty, care, loyalty. Even months later, the estate's presence loomed. Distant relatives whispered, some shunned me, some cautiously offered support. Linda and Cheryl moved to a different state, their bitterness palpable in every phone call. The family legacy was forever split. Slowly, I began rebuilding. I visited Grandma's house, now officially mine, preserving her belongings, keeping her memory alive. Dad and I bonded more deeply than ever. Cousins who supported me stayed close. I focused on work, life, and honoring Grandma without letting the past destroy me. Looking back, the entire ordeal was devastating, but also clarifying. Grandma's last act had torn apart some of her children, but it protected the values she cared about. Sitting in her garden, holding her necklace, I finally felt at peace. Yes, I had lost parts of my family, but I had preserved the truth. And in that, I realized Grandma hadn't just left me wealth, she left me strength.